So, during the second week for the course Management of Inventory Systems, a specific topic we intend to discuss, that is the inventory problems and selective inventory management. Now, this is a very important say the issue, and that is why at the earlier stage of our course say lectures, so we have included this topic. Now, as you are already aware that you may face in all likelihood different types of inventory problems, as there are different types of inventory items in an organization, and there could be the different types of inventory control policy being adopted by an organization at any point in time. So, obviously, it is expected that the inventory problems may be of different types, and you have to be selective in your approach, in the sense that as a priority you need to select those problems which are considered critical, or which are considered critical to say organizational performance. Now, during this week, this particular topic we will be addressing, and there will be 5 lecture sessions. In the first lecture, we will specifically identify the factors which determine the inventory problems. So, you must have a thorough idea about these factors, and you will get on completion of this particular lecture, you will come to know, or you will have a list of factors to be considered for defining the inventory problem. Then the next the subtopic to discuss, that is the importance of inventories. How do you define the importance of an inventory item, and how to define importance of an item. So, these are the 3 issues we will be discussing during lecture 1. Lecture 2 will address inventory classification schemes. There may be different types of classification schemes you may come across. So, you must have a thorough idea about all these schemes, and specifically ABC analysis, related to ABC analysis, what kind of methodology you will adopt for carrying out ABC analysis for the given set of items. So, this we will elaborate. During lecture 3, we will be discussing the methods you may adopt for collection of data for ABC analysis, and a typical example, a numerical example, we will take it up. The next lecture, lecture 4, other types of classification schemes and their use, we will discuss in detail. And similarly, in lecture 5, other sets of classification schemes we will discuss. That means the continuation of the earlier the lecture topic. So, that is why we are saying it is a part 2, that in the second part there is a large number of such classification schemes you need to adopt. So, one by one each of these schemes we will discuss in detail, and wherever possible we will bring in numerical problems against a particular scheme. Then towards the end we will specifically highlight the key points to remember. That means, as a learner, as a student, when all these lecture sessions are over, so at the end of the second week, so what are the important points you need to remember, or what are the important aspects you have learned. So, this we are going to highlight. Now, during the first lecture session, right at this moment, we intend to discuss 3 important the issues. First one is the factors determining inventory problems. So, this is the first issue. The second one is the importance of inventories. This is to be very clearly understood that one item is considered important and the second item or the next item may not be considered important in a given context. So, the contexts must be known, and as well as how you are attaching importance to a particular item, that also must be clearly understood. And then of course, we will define importance of an item in specific terms. Now, let us talk about the factors which essentially determine an inventory problem. So, we have made some comments. So, let me first go through all these issues, all these say the background information one by one. We have observed during our preliminary discussions of issues related to inventory management. That means, you please refer to the lecture sessions in the week 1 or in the very first week. We have introduced the concept of essentially we have introduced the concept of inventory and materials management, including the systems part. There are many important issues we have highlighted. So, referring to these issues, what we have concluded that there may be varieties of inventory problems. Okay. It is not that just given an organization you come across only one type of inventory problem. Okay. So, there are varieties of inventory problems usually, and a number of factors actually determine the complexity and dimensions of such problems. Dimension in the sense that supposing you are dealing with a large number of items. So, it is expected that there may be large number of inventory control systems, assuming that each item is a unique one, and the conditions under which all these items are getting purchased. These conditions vary from one item to another. Okay. And because each item serves a specific purpose. So, the dimensions of the problem you need to consider, and similarly the complexity. For example, you know what is the demand of an item. You also know that the demand could be a variable, and the stationary or non-stationary the demand situation you may come across, and the lead time could be a constant, lead time could be a variable, and majority of the cases, suppose you find that the demand is a variable and so also lead time, and you also assume in when you try to formulate the problem of the real world situation in respect of inventory management or inventory control and management, you may find that actually the demand and lead time, they may be related. So, it is a very complex situation. So, this the level of complexity you must know, and what are the factors actually determining the complexity of the problem also you should be aware of. In this context, the main factors to be considered while reviewing inventory management systems are as follows. That means, whenever you visit an organization, and obviously you come across different kinds of inventory control systems for all these items. So, there are a large number of existing inventory control systems, and there is a system, so whether it is a good or bad, acceptable or non acceptable, that is a different issue, but there is a systems, and that is why you will find that there is an inventory visible for that particular item. That means, someone has taken some decisions based on some inventory control systems. So, the first thing you need to do that whatever may be the inventory management systems, you need to evaluate it, okay, and through evaluation or through review of the existing inventory management systems, so you will come to know, you will have many background information, and there are you will come to know the reasons of say the reasons of goodness of a particular inventory control systems, or there could be some the demerits of the existing systems. So you will come to know essentially what are the factors actually the responsible for making an inventory control system a good one or a bad one. So while you assess an inventory management systems, you should be aware of the numbers and the types of parts, components, sub-assemblies, assemblies under production. So this is point number 1. Point number 2 is you are aware of the types and quantities of raw materials. Point number 3, types and numbers of capital goods. A varieties of capital goods you need to use in a typical production systems. So what are these capital goods? They are all considered inventory. Machineries of different types, processes of different types, etc., etc. So we look into the different types of processes, their performance, their functions. Okay, so like say the different kinds of machine tools you need to use, the cutting tools, material handling equipments. So all these the details about their types and the numbers you should be aware of. Types and quantities of inventory and their value. Like we will take up one important issue called valuation of inventory. So there are different types of the inventories, and against each type at any point in time you need to determine its level or the position, inventory position, and the corresponding value in monetary terms. Purchasing policies related to types of inventories. The purchasing or the procurement function is an important function, already we have mentioned, and there could be different types of procurement policies for different items, different inventory items. So you should be aware of availability and consumption rates of inventory items. So this availability also you must know, and the consumption rates. So consumption rates also may vary over time of an inventory item. So the data you must have. Existing inventory control policies, which are very closely linked with the purchasing policies in majority of the cases, and the functional value of the inventory items. Okay, so the value of the inventory items. Now the value can be expressed in 4 different ways. So the first one is definitely the functional value or the use value. So whenever you refer to inventory control problem related to a particular item, so the first thing you should be aware of, that is the functional value of that particular item at that point in time. So in respect of processes and the products, that means while you define a particular item and define the particular item's value of particular item, now you should be aware of that particular item is in which particular processes, or one process or multiple processes that particular item is used, or it may be used in that in the final product. Okay, so you must have very clear-cut ideas about all this, and accordingly you can define its functional value, how important that particular item is with respect to the process performance or with respect to the product performance. However, there may be other important factors that need to be considered in a specific situation. That means we have identified 8 specific situations. Okay, in the list you will find that there are 8 sorts of situations, but in a given situation or in the specific situations, there could be other factors also you may come across. Okay. Now, the next important issue is the how do you define the importance of an item. Okay. Either the item is very considered important, or you might say in a given situation I have studied its use or its functional value, and I might say that it's not that important, it is of lesser importance. Or in certain situations you may find that the item is considered the least important or unimportant. So, the question is how do you define the word called importance? Inventory control calls for understanding and knowledge of the nature of inventories. So, the point to be noted, that is the nature of inventory. Because of constraints, all that you will later on you will come to know that when you try to model an inventory control problem, so what are the the constraints you need to consider. So, later on we will take up these issues, that means inventory modeling under constraints. Initially you start with an ideal situation, that means inventory control modeling or inventory modeling without any constraints. But in the real world you need to go for an inventory control systems under constraints. So, because of these constraints, all inventory items in an organization cannot be or need not be controlled with equal importance. Okay. So, they are not equally important. In a given situation, some inventory items may be considered important and others not. So, this point already I have highlighted. Important items are required to be under rigorous and strict inventory control, okay, whereas others considered as unimportant or less important may require no or lesser control. This is obvious in fact, because you have a limited time, you have limited resource, and these resources need to be mobilized or need to be used to control the inventory. So, obviously in a given situation under limited resource condition, you need to be very particular. That means first the priority is to be given to the important items. In majority of the cases, the proportion of the important items is less, maybe 10%, 20%, and their control ensures significant improvement of inventory management at the organizational or the systems level. Is it okay? So, this is we have observed, and you can when you get the data from an inventory control systems for multiple products in an organization, so you come across this situation. The majority of the cases, a company may deal with hundreds and thousands of inventory items. This is the typical the discrete part manufacturing systems. It's not at all uncommon to find a situation, it's not at all uncommon that the company may be using some 50,000 say the items under inventory control systems, or there may be 100,000 items you are dealing with. A product which you are manufacturing, it may consist of, like in its bill of material, may consist of 50,000 or 60,000 items of various types, okay, various kinds of raw materials you may have to use for those products. So, this is very common. It is not possible or not necessary to assess inventory control systems for all these items. That means you just cannot take a blind approach, right. So, you have to be very particular. So, that is why this particular point needs to be understood in a given situation. It is not possible or not necessary to assess inventory control systems for all these items, even if there are existing inventory control systems for all the items. It is essential that appropriate classification schemes are used based on importance of an inventory item. Okay. So first you try to classify them, and from different perspectives. We need to be selective in identifying and controlling inventory of those items that are considered important, with no or less control of those not considered important. This concept is referred to as selective inventory management. Okay. So, so the selective inventory management as a rule is applied in almost all the organizations, particularly for the large and medium sized organization. This is a must. For a small organizations or for a startup company, when you may come across, or the product which you are handling, it may consist of less number of items, maybe 25 items or the 60 items in a given situation, and that is the only product right now you are producing. Obviously, you will have you must have very strict control on their inventory management systems for each and every item. But as the company grows, so also it's the number of items and the number of products. So this is applicable. That means selective inventory management as a rule is applicable for all the large organizations. Now the next important issue we are going to discuss, that is how to define importance of an item. This is very, very important. The term importance, we have been using this term, but now we need to define it in clear and explicit terms. The term importance can be defined from a number of perspectives. So this point you must remember. Now these perspectives may be many, and out of many such perspectives, now the 6 specific perspectives are common. So we are naming them. The first one is unit purchase price. So whenever you get an item supplied from an outside supplier, now unit purchase price which is negotiated and which is agreed upon is known. So if you say that I will say that this item is important because its unit purchase price is very, very high. Similarly, so unit purchase price may be low, but the number of units you consume per unit of time, say year, may be very, very high. So the next important say the criterion with which you define importance of an item is annual usage value. Okay, so we will explain it later on. Essentially, it is annual consumptions in physical units multiplied by the unit price. So it's in monetary terms. Now the importance can be defined with respect to an item's criticality. Mainly we are focusing on its functional value. Consumption rate, there is another very important perspective in inventory control. Next one is the availability. Okay, so sometimes availability is a problem, and if the availability is a problem, that means you face a serious problem in running the inventory the control systems or inventory management systems in your organization. So availability is an important criterion, and the last one is the inventory level or positions at any point in time. Okay, so these are the 6 factors we need to consider, and against each perspective there may be a specific classification scheme. Okay, so with this understanding, what you can do, that means you can identify or say an item considered to be important or unimportant. Now let me elaborate on the say particularly the two aspects. One is the criticality and the second one is the availability. Criticality refers to a situation where the items, the performance is considered. And suppose it's a capital equipment item, a machine tool, a machine tool. So it may so happen that because of say the non-functioning of a particular part, the machine tool stops working. Okay, so this may be a very common occurrence in many instances, in many situations. So and when you start probing the situation, you may find that that particular item is not at all expensive. Okay, its price is a cheap item, and the price is very less. But still, as far as the function of that particular unit, say machine tool is considered, this is very critical. That means if this is not in good condition or acceptable condition, the machine tool may fail. So there could be a breakdown situation. So this is very critical, and if it is not made available, suppose for that particular item you have not bothered about its inventory control systems, existing inventory control systems, and many a time the shortages do occur, okay, for these particular items. So even if its unit price is very less, so the availability of a particular say that particular machine tool where this particular item is used is not guaranteed. So there may be excessive breakdown situation, and there could be lost the production time, and it may be very expensive. So this point is to be considered very minutely while you propose an inventory control system. Similarly, the availability. Now, normally, suppose you have different types of items to be used for the production of your goods or production of your product. Now, it may so happen that out of say 100 items listed in the bill of material, suppose the 10 items need to be they are to be imported from say a few foreign companies, and so obviously they are to be imported, and suppose these items are to be imported from an outside country, and you have to follow the certain procedures and the rules very strictly, because it comes in the domain of the international purchasing. So you have to be very careful in determining the inventory control policy for such items, and mostly these items are imported and the scarce items. So the availability is an important factor to be considered. Some of the items are made available in the local market, and as and when you need it, so immediately with a simple call to the concerned person, you get the item supplied. Many times for such items you can have a direct computer to computer purchasing systems, so availability is not a problem. But supposing that particular item is not available in the local market, but it is available in another part of the country, and for which that means in another region, and the company which the supplies this item essentially it is this company is situated or located in another region of the country. So the lead time of procurement may be very high, substantial, and those items are basically called not that critical, but those items is difficult to procure. We say difficult to procure. So those are classified as difficult to procure. Then another important issue, that is inventory level or position. I have already mentioned in the previous lecture session that while you try to assess the performance of an inventory control system, one important factor need to be considered, that is the level of understock or the level of overstocking. So, so you need to constantly monitor the inventory level or inventory position of an item. So it's a function of time, and it's obviously it's also the inventory control systems affects the level of inventory or position in inventory at any point in time. So at any point in time, given an item, suppose you find that the inventory position is at a very high level. So at that particular point in time or during this period of time, so that particular item becomes very, very important to you. That means you need to take a decision first how to dispose of the extra inventory, okay, or extra stock that you have. That is point number one. That is that the immediately you have to take a decision, but you need to look into or you need to assess the existing inventory control systems, and you need to develop and improve systems for inventory control for such an item. Okay, so I conclude this particular session, and I hope that that the importance of white item should be clearly defined, and accordingly the classification scheme is to be developed. So in the next lecture sessions we will be referring to all these classification schemes. So thank you.